You check your investment app in the morning, and there it is, a green 10% gain on your portfolio. You feel it instantly, a little lift, a small hit of, I'm doing something right. 5 minutes later, out of habit, you check your credit card app. Balance, $800, nothing dramatic, nothing you can't handle. But there it is, that tiny flicker of dread, barely noticeable, gone in a second. But there. And here's the strange part. On paper, your portfolio gain might be worth more in actual dollars than that $800 balance, but it doesn't feel like it cancels out. It doesn't feel like a win and a loss that balance each other into neutral. It feels like two completely different things happening in two completely different parts of your brain. Here's what most people get wrong when they compare investment gains to debt payoff. They treat every dollar the same, as if a dollar gained and a dollar owed are just opposite signs on the same number line. My name is Davis. If you've ever felt weirdly unsatisfied by a good investing day because of a small, nagging credit card balance sitting in the background, hit subscribe. Because today I'm going to show you why a $0 balance is worth more than a 10% stock gain, and it has almost nothing to do with the actual math. Let's start with the real problem, because it's not what people assume. Most people evaluate their financial situation purely in dollar terms. Add the gains, subtract the debts, net it all out. And whatever number is left is supposedly how good you should feel. But here's what most people don't realize. Your brain doesn't actually process gains and debts the same way. A gain sits in your portfolio, quiet, abstract, something you check occasionally. A balance sits in your awareness differently. It's something your brain quietly tracks in the background, even when you're not actively thinking about it, because unresolved obligations tend to occupy a small, persistent slice of your attention. This is a well-documented pattern in how people experience financial stress. Debt, even small, manageable debt, tends to create a kind of low-level background hum, a small tax on your mental bandwidth that doesn't show up on any spreadsheet. It's not really about the dollar amount. It's about the fact that it's unresolved, that there's a decision still pending, a thing still owed, a loop that hasn't closed. Meanwhile, a stock gain, even a meaningfully sized one, doesn't create the opposite effect. It doesn't refund you that mental bandwidth. It just sits there as a nice number. Which means comparing a 10% gain to an $800 balance isn't actually comparing two numbers on the same scale. One of them is purely financial. The other one is financial and psychological at the same time. Let's walk through this with an actual example because this is where it gets real. Imagine two people, Maya and Tom. Maya has $3,000 invested and just saw a 10% gain, $300 on paper. She also has an $800 credit card balance sitting untouched, manageable, minimum payments covered. Nothing urgent. Tom has no investments yet, he hasn't started, but he does have a $0 credit card balance fully paid off last month. On paper, Maya is clearly ahead. She has $300 more in gains and an asset base Tom doesn't have yet. But here's what actually happens day to day. Maya opens her banking app several times a week and gets that same small flicker every time she sees the balance sitting there, even though it's not a big deal. It nudges small decisions. She hesitates slightly before saying yes to a dinner out, feels a small pang of guilt buying something unnecessary, because there's still that open loop sitting in the background. Tom, meanwhile, opens his banking app and just sees numbers. No flicker, no hesitation, no background hum. He hasn't built wealth yet, but he's not spending any mental energy managing dread either. Same month, same general financial competence, completely different daily experience because one of them is carrying an unresolved loop and the other isn't. Here's why this matters more than people realize. Decision fatigue is real, and unresolved financial obligations are one of the quietest sources of it. Every open loop in your life, a bill you haven't dealt with, a balance you haven't paid off, a decision you've been putting off, takes up a small amount of mental space, even when you're not consciously thinking about it. Multiply that by weeks and months of carrying even a small balance, and you're not just paying interest, you're paying attention every single day in tiny amounts you don't notice individually, but absolutely feel cumulatively. So, how should you actually think about this? Here's the framework. Debt payoff and investment gains are not interchangeable, even when the dollar amounts are similar, because they're solving two different problems. Investment gains build your future. Debt payoff frees up your present. Both matter, but they're not substitutes for each other. And treating them as if they cancel out mathematically misses the actual experience of living with each one. Second, use a simple gut check to know when a balance is quietly costing you more than its dollar size suggests. Ask yourself, do I feel a small reaction, a flicker, a hesitation, when I check this balance or think about it unprompted? If the answer is yes, that debt isn't just costing you interest. It's costing you a small, repeated tax on your attention, regardless of how manageable the balance technically is. Third, once you notice that reaction, prioritize getting that specific balance to zero before chasing additional investment gains, not because the math always demands it, but because removing that background noise has its own kind of value, one that doesn't show up in your portfolio, but absolutely shows up in how you experience your day-to-day financial life. Here's the identity shift underneath all of this. A $0 balance isn't just a financial state, it's a mental state. It's the difference between opening your banking app and seeing information versus opening it and briefly re-experiencing a small, recurring pang of unresolved obligation. A 10% stock gain is genuinely good news, but it doesn't buy back that mental space the way clearing a balance does, because gains and freedom from debt aren't the same currency, even when they're measured in the same dollars. So here's your action step. Pull up your credit card balance right now and notice your actual reaction, not the dollar amount, the reaction. If there's even a small flicker of dread or hesitation, that's your signal. That balance is quietly taxing your attention regardless of its size, and getting it to zero is worth prioritizing not just for the math, but for the mental space you get back the moment that number hits zero. If this changed how you think about small debt versus investment gains, hit subscribe and let me know in the comments. Have you ever felt that flicker checking a balance, even a small one?